Hello backpackers, this is Juan from Juan Backpacks. I'm here today to talk about my conventional fly fishing gear. What it means is I've got a reel on the fly fishing gear, not a Tenkara rod with no reel. So conventional fly fishing gear that I take with me when backpacking into the backcountry and I want to fly fish. I've got two different kits here, two different outfits here that I use depending on the water that I'm fishing, depending on the flies that I'm going to be throwing, depending on the size of the fish that I'm going to be fishing for. And so I'm going to cover those two different kind of outfits. They use the same core fly kit, but the fly rods and reels are different. One of those kits is 17.6 ounces all in, just over a pound. The other kit is slightly heavier at 21.9 ounces, which is roughly a pound and a half. But they both have their purpose in the backcountry. They both backpack in really nicely in my backpack. And here we go. Let's dive into it. The first kit I'm going to talk about is for smaller water, tighter water, smaller fish, and maybe smaller flies, not as much big flies. I like streamers and things like that. And that is the kit that rests on a core of a 7.5 foot 3-weight. This is a fiberglass rod, just my preference, could be any material, but I use a 7.5 foot 3-weight. This one's actually a Orvis superfine rod. I like it. It breaks down fairly small. It fits in the side pocket of my pack, fits in the front pocket of my pack, the mesh front pocket, really nicely, and stays in place. I take it into the field with this cloth case, not the heavy case, just to keep the weight down, but yet to protect it from grit and sand and scrapes and things like that. So I keep the soft case on it. This rod with the soft case comes in at 4.2 ounces. So that's 4.2 ounces right there. The reel that I pair with this 3-weight 7.5 foot glass rod is an Orvis reel. It is a bat and kill. The size is 1. I use the cloth case for it. All in the weight with the line, the leader material, the tapered leader, and the case is 4.2 ounces as well. It happens to be the same as the rod. So this is 4.2 ounces. So I use the case to protect the reel. On the reel, I load it up with weight forward floating fly line, 3-weight. I use a 7.5 foot tapered leader, 5X. And then I use some tippet material on the 5X leader to protect my leader from not having to cut into the tapered leader. They're a little bit expensive, a little bit of a pain when you cut them down too much. And so I add a little bit of tippet, 5X tippet on the end of my tapered leader. So it's a pretty simple kind of rig. It's a very simple, small reel that fits the rod really nicely and keeps the weight down. Again, between these two, it's 8.4 ounces. And then the last piece of the gear that I add in is going to be the kit that I take with me, fly fishing kit. I typically take the same kit no matter which outfit I take with me. So this kit I'll talk about in a minute, but it is 9.2 ounces all in with tools and everything that I need to fish in the backcountry successfully. And that's a key for me. I was a fishing guide for a number of years, over a decade, and I really focus on catching fish, and so that kit does it for me. So that's the first rod outfit. Again, it comes in at 17.6 ounces all in, all 3 items. The second rod outfit that I use is a 9 foot 5-weight. This 9 foot 5-weight is a travel rod, and I'll go through the detail there. The total weight on the fly rod, fly reel with the 5-weight is in the fly kit that I just showed you there is going to be a total of 21.9 ounces, which is just around a pound and a half. So the rod itself, it's a 6-piece travel rod. It's a Clearwater travel rod from Orvis. I really like it a lot. It's a 9 foot 5-weight. It breaks down much smaller than my 3-weight does, which is kind of nice. I can fit this in side pockets of my packs. I can fit it in the mesh pocket in the back or the front of the pack. I can even put it inside my pack if I want to. Again, I carry this rod into the field with the cloth on it to protect it from grit, sand, and scratching and so forth, and just keeps it kind of together. And then this cloth with the rod in here is 5.7 ounces. So this rod with the cloth is 5.7 ounces. Adding the reel, matched with the 9-foot 5-weight reel. This is a Clearwater reel, and it is a size 2, which matches perfectly with this rod. On the reel, I've got some weight forward floating line. I've got a 9-foot, slightly longer tapered leader, monofilament, and then I add a foot or two of tippet to the end of that tapered leader, again, so I don't have to cut into my taper and replace my leaders very often. And so, again, all in, the weight on this with the case as well, again, to protect it from scratching, sand, and grit getting into the reel. This reel with the case is 7 ounces total. The kit that I take with me when I take the 5-weight into the field is, again, the same kit, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. All in, the 9-foot 5-weight with the rod, reel, line, everything that I just showed you is going to be, again, 21.9 ounces. Not too shabby, around 1.5 pounds. I will use this kit when I'm in slightly more open water, bigger water like lake fishing, when I want to throw bigger flies, even some moderate sized streamers, and also when I'm fishing for bigger fish. So that's where this 9-foot 5-weight kit comes in. Again, both kits are very light, easy to pack in, kind of minimalist approach to this. Now, let's dive into the actual chest pack that I have here and the weight and so forth. The chest pack I had made for me by Outdoor or Backcountry Exposure, sorry, and it's made of X-Pack. I don't think they're making these packs anymore. I got it from Etsy, but there are plenty of other makers out there on Etsy and beyond. They're making stuff out of X-Pack, smaller chest packs. I'd highly recommend, if you're going to go into the backcountry and you want to keep your kit light and nimble, that you look into X-Pack, because I do have a regular chip pack, a chest pack. It's heavy. I mean, that thing probably weighs 1.5 pounds or more, just that alone. And so this keeps me really light. This chest pack is 3.5 ounces, really light. So let's take a dive inside of this real quick. The tools I take, very minimalist in terms of the tools. First up is forceps. I actually order a smaller pair of forceps. They're about 2.5 inches long. I find that they get the job done. I haven't had a situation where I couldn't reach a fly. Fly fishing, trout and other fish tend not to swallow flies really deep, and this I can really get down in there in most cases. I've never had a situation where I couldn't, and it keeps the weight down. Again, every little bit helps. Every little bit helps, keeps the form factor down, the size of your gear down, so it fits in your pack better, and it keeps the weight down. And so I really like these forceps. I can also use them to mash down barbs in areas, regions, states where that's required too. So the forceps are a tool I take into the field. The next tool that I take in the field, I actually put it in the fly box. I'm going to open that up for storage. I always store everything inside the bag and then pull it out. And I'll hang this on the outside along with connecting the clip or the forceps on the outside of this chest pack. There's a zinger here. I'm splurging a little bit on the zinger. Uh-oh. My zinger finally bit the dust. Oh well, maybe I can fix it. And then I've got some clippers here. So you really want to carry clippers. You don't want to be biting line off and using knives to cut line. And so I find clippers to be extremely useful. This one has a little punch for the eyelet in case there's some glue or something in your eyelets of your flies. And so I like this one a lot. And it's super small, super light, super minimalist. Let's dive into the tapered leaders I've mentioned a number of times. I take a couple extra tapered leaders with me when I go into the field. Again, this pack all in weighs 9.2 ounces. The 7.5 foot 5X tapered leader here, extra leader. There's 2 of them, I think, in this pack. Yeah. And then there's 2 in this pack. These are 5X tapered leader, 9 foot. And again, I'll use this one with the 7.5 foot 3-weight. I'll use this one with the longer 9 foot 5-weight, just my preference. On the end of your tapered leader, you're going to want to have some tippet, so you don't have to keep cutting into your tapered leader. And so I take a couple spools of tippet with me typically. Sometimes I'll take 5X and 6X, both, so I have a little bit smaller tippet. And like this time, I've got a 5X fluorocarbon, because sometimes I like fluorocarbon for sinking flies, for nymphs and so forth, and streamers. And so I might, because this sinks. And then I take a spool of 5X monofilament, which has a tendency to float, and so I take both with me. There's a way though that you can really minimize this. You see how thick this is, you see how much room this takes up, and it's a little bit heavier. If you really want to get super light, you can use one of these cards, a plastic card like this. I get them from Amazon or from Dragontail Tenkara. Don't got anything to do with that site. It's just a place where I buy these things because I find them there pretty often. These have little tabs on them, and I can push every other tab, this way, one this way, and do it alternating like that. And I can put my 5X tippet on one side, a few feet of that, because you don't need much. You're just going in the backcountry for maybe a week or so. And then I can put 6X tippet on the other side, or fluorocarbon tippet, whatever I want to. So I can literally turn this into this, get it a lot lighter and a lot smaller. You can even carry them multiple, of these with you if you want to. Again, getting a little crazy, I guess, with the weight and the size, but form factor is a big thing to me. I like gear small and still serving a purpose, and so I like doing this. When I did the John Muir Trail, I took cards only. I didn't take spools, and I had enough tippet and everything to last me for a whole month on the John Muir Trail, fishing every single evening when we got into camp. So that's tippet material. The other thing I carry with me is for dry fly fishing. I've got this gel floatant to pre-treat my dry flies so that they stay floating longer and don't absorb as much water when I'm dry fly fishing. So like my elk-haired caddis, my BWOs, things like that. So I've got that gel I take with me, and then I've also got this shake and float for when they get kind of wet, they get kind of sinky, and they start to soak up some water. I can push the flies against my shirt to squeeze out some water, open this up, put the fly in here, shake it up, leave them in there for few seconds, and it absorbs out the water out of the fly. It revives it again, and it's ready to float high on top of the water. So I take this with me because it just cuts down on having to change out flies that are sinking, and just keeps me on the water fishing more instead of messing with my flies that are sinking. The other thing I take with me are some floats, some strike indicators, as they're called in fly fishing. When I was a kid, we called them bobbers. I take a couple different, 3 different types with me, maybe 1 or 2 of each. And so I've got this I think it's called a core lock or airlock. I've got a small airlock here. I've got a lightning strike indicator here, which is a foam indicator that you can just put right onto your leader. And then I've got some stick-on indicators. I really like these for my 3-weight because they're really easy to cast on the 3-weight. And so that's the indicators I take with me, because when I'm fishing nymphs that sink, I want to sink flies, or beadhead nymphs, things like that. I want to sink those flies underneath an indicator. I like doing that a lot. So the other thing I take with me is some split shot. You can see here, I put everything in Ziploc bags, and I literally save Ziploc bags of gear that I buy, so I have things like this in small Ziplocs. I don't take a whole pack of a split shot with me because you're never going to need all that split shot. You're just not. How many times have you been fly fishing, even for a week or two, have you used a whole pack of split shot? Not very often. So I can take a few pieces of split shot at different sizes, put it into a small Ziploc bag. I save again on form factor, how big my gear is and how it makes it easier to pack when it's smaller. And also it makes it a little bit lighter. Every little bit counts towards your overall weight. Anytime you can save a little bit of weight, you might as well do it. And so that's my tools and some of my basic gear. And I've used this basic gear from the backwoods of Pennsylvania into the Smokies on the East Coast, out to California in the Sierra. I've used this same gear every place I've gone, and I have caught trout every place that I've gone. I've caught fish fly fishing every place that I've gone. So this is an effective kit that will get the job done for you. Now the flies. Let's talk about the flies, where the rubber hits the road, right? So this is a foam fly box. What I've found is the foam fly boxes overall tend to be lighter than a lot of other plastic boxes or boxes with silicone in them. And so I go with the foam because it's lighter. I also like foam boxes because they tend to be taller, so that if you do have some fluffy dry flies that you want to put in here that you don't want to get smashed down, it works for those. The other nice thing about the foam is that you typically has two sides to it. So you can use both sides. Here, there's a card, and on this side, there's a card. This particular foam fly box is about, I'd say about 6 or 7 inches tall by about 3.5 to 4 inches wide. And I picked this bigger one because it just fits in here, and it still leaves a little bit of room for my float and stuff like that there. And so it's like perfect fit into my chest packs. You might want to play around with the size of the box. Now, when I open this up, my organization is really simple. One side typically has my dry flies and my tenkara flies, because sometimes they're fished like dry flies. And the other side has my sinking flies, but like nymphs and streamers. And so those are basically the 3 categories of flies that I have. I've got dry flies that float on top. I've got sinking flies that are nymph imitations or larva imitations of flies, and sinking flies that are streamer, minnow imitation streamers. So those are the 3 categories that I take. I keep it really simple. Some of the highlights of my dry flies, I've got some BWOs in here, probably size 16s, something like that. I've got size 16 and 12 elk-haired caddis. I typically will carry elk-haired caddis, which is really one of my most productive flies, in 3 different colors, white, black, and the natural tan. And I like the size 12s for fishing a dry dropper. That's why I take those. And in the backcountry, honestly, the bigger the better. I think sometimes the fish really want a meal because they are under ice a lot. Especially if you're in the mountains, they have a shortage of food out there. And so when something hits the water and it looks really good, they're going to attack it. So you'll notice here that I have mostly on my dry flies, mostly suggestive flies. These are flies that suggest things but aren't exact matches of certain species. I think that's really important. I think suggestive flies are better because you don't have to have as many really specialized flies then, and you can use them across many different scenarios. For example, the elk-haired caddis I mentioned earlier, that could be a caddis. That could be a moth. That could be a grasshopper, right? A black one could be a cricket that fell in the water. And so I like that fly because it's really versatile. And again, I've got a couple of different other dry flies in here and some tenkara flies. And so I like to carry that with me. On the other side, the sinking flies, you see in here, I've got a woolly bugger here, right? I've got just some micro streamers made out of some artificial material. Oh, there's my micro streamer. It got on my dry fly side. So there's the micro streamer right there. Put it back on the right side here. Also, I'll carry some greeny weenies, which is my favorite. But as far as the suggestive sinking flies, the nymphs, beadhead nymphs, you'll see prince nymphs in here, good suggestive flies of emergers. You'll see some pheasant tails in here, and you'll see hare's ears in here. And so again, these are suggestive flies, don't exactly match exactly things that are in the water, but they look kind of like something buggy, something to eat. And I think they're really strong flies to carry with you. Again, I've caught trout on these flies from here to California. I'm also carrying a few favorites in here. One of them is a floating fly. One of my favorites is like foam beetles because they don't sink very easily, or foam ants. They're really effective across many different scenarios across the United States. And so I'll take some foam with me as well on the dry fly side. And I've got some Waltz worms in here. That's a biggie in Pennsylvania. And I've got some greeny weenies, another biggie in Pennsylvania. So if you've got some favorite little flies you want to throw in there, you certainly do. But stick to some of the suggestive flies, some of the basic flies, and you really can't go wrong. So that's my fly collection. Not all inclusive there, but pretty much what I carry. Again, this box, this gear, I've backpacked into waters in the Smokies, in Pennsylvania, in California, and I've been able to catch fish, catch trout using this gear in every single scenario. Never have gone fishless. So that's my backcountry, backpacking, fly fishing kits. A little bit about both of those kits, the scenarios that I use them in. And hopefully this is going to be helpful to you if you're a backcountry fly angler and you like to backpack into those places where not very many anglers are. So until next time, get out there and do some backpacking, do some fly fishing if you can. and I will see you on my next video.